everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in. You are watching The Vuyo Show, coming to you, of course, from New York City. I'm hoping that you're having a fantastic day wherever you are around the world and that you're ready to receive what we have in store for you today. It's going to be an exciting and an epic episode as we are speaking about all things marketing, entrepreneurship, the world of e-commerce, and everything in between. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy the next couple of minutes with myself and this incredible guest on your screen right now, the one and only Chief Marketing Officer at Bokksu, as well as many other things which we're going to be unpacking on the show today. Ladies and gents, it is Louis. Hello.
Going.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great today.
I didn't want to say a surname because I was like, I will let you do the honors. I don't want to say it incorrectly. So if you can please share it with us.
It can be a little intimidating. It's Monoyudis.
Monoyudis. Okay. And the origin of it, is it where exactly would you kind of locate it?
Greek.
Okay. I see. But Louis, we met very recently, right, at this incredible event by our friends at Great Journal in Soho, and I was extremely intrigued hearing you speak in that panel. I was like, my goodness, there's so much insight, there's so much value in what you're sharing with us, but also at an easy and uncomfortable manner, right? In the way in which you explained everything thoroughly. Made a lot of sense in so many ways. So I was like, I would love to have a conversation with him for sure. And that's why we're here today. To those who are wondering. But what brought you to that event? It was an e-commerce event by Great Journal, but for you specifically, as someone who said yes to that particular panel invitation, what prompted you to wanting to empower entrepreneurs in the e-commerce space?
Yeah, it was such an incredible opportunity to be speaking on that panel. It was hosted by Shopify at their incredible location down in Soho, which was such a great venue. And I was just really inspired seeing the other panelists that I would be sitting next to and wanted to be able to participate.
Yeah. And the value that you are offering, right? If we're just to touch base on from where we've encountered each other, which is all about e-commerce and the world of digitization of business, right? Which is what you guys were unpacking in that panel on that day. Where does your understanding of the e-commerce space stem from? Would you say particularly in what you do right now, or you've always kind of been someone who's had an enthusiasm for the e-commerce space?
I've always been really excited by the potential of online communities, shopping, and just general culture, and have been in the e-commerce space directly for a little bit over more than a decade. But even before that, was so excited when, the opportunity to sell more and more products online became more generally acceptable, and how very quickly the overall population went from, if you think about fashion, oh, we have to see it in person, we have to try it on in person, it's going to be hard to really make that sale online, to obviously there's still opportunities to improve around those objections, but more and more people are far more comfortable to purchase things like fashion or perfume or candles or cosmetics in the online ecosystem than ever before.
And why do you think that now is particularly a time when e-commerce is thriving so much? Like, what about this time makes it something that, I mean, people these days, you'd hear someone saying, I don't go to the mall anymore. I just shop online for everything. Why is that? Why is that our culture right now? And how far do you think we're going to go with that trajectory? For how long is that going to be a reality for many of us?
The real tipping point came with, the full advent of wide adoption of mobile phones, and then also mobile phones allowing for shoppable commerce to work. I think that especially with the advent of social media, they're shopping on mobile, they're learning on mobile, they're engaging on mobile, their communities are on mobile. So as soon as e-commerce websites were able to be optimized and really shoppable in the mobile experience, before they used to be like shrunk down desktop websites, which were really cumbersome. And then they went into kind of clunky responsive designs, and now it's far more native to mobile, either with a native shopping app. A lot of people now are, of course, shopping directly through TikTok Shop, Meta Shop, these different, or their own, Net-a-Porter or whatever apps they might have their phone. So it's really all about that mobile explosion that has made e-commerce so much more accessible and really exciting.
And fun as well, because you get to see all your options in one place, right? And you get to
Absolutely.
explore everything at the same time. My curiosity now really stems from like your particular journey. And you were mentioning in the panel that you've not necessarily always been on this side of the e-commerce space, but you are in a completely different industry, but really in within the entrepreneurial and media, business, fashion space as well. Share with us a little bit about how you started in that industry before we move on to where you are right now.
Yeah, I can give you a quick overview of my background if that's helpful.
Yeah.
So I went to undergrad at Harvard and majored in, as I like to joke, the highly marketable degree of folklore and mythology. All joking aside, though, that really was the study of the power of narrative and the stories that we tell that define a culture. And if you think about what branding is, that's all that we're doing. We're taking a product, we're telling the story around it, and that builds the brand, right?
Mm.
It's either like heritage and craftsmanship like Hermes, it's innovation and expression like Apple. Those are the stories told around the physical products. So it was really incredible training. From there, I worked at a big advertising and branding agency called Leo Burnett, which was based in Chicago, and got the opportunity to participate on brands such as Coca-Cola, Motorola, Morgan Stanley, and others, and see how these huge companies that have a long history and a huge customer base are able to continue to evolve and stay nimble with their brand positioning, their messaging, their segmentation strategies. From there, I moved to New York. I always wanted to be in the fashion world. So I worked at Calvin Klein, Tommy Hilfiger, and John Barbados, helping those companies launch new divisions and price points, which I think last I heard from my friends that are still at those companies today are doing over $1 billion collectively annually, which is incredible to have been part of that. And then I pivoted into e-commerce and direct to consumer, really focusing on premium and luxury goods and price points.
Mm, that's such a colorful brief that you've just given us, and I love color because now it means that we have to dissect a little bit of those different spaces and stages, because they kind of culminate collectively to sharing the journey and the story to what we get to appreciate and inspire and be inspired by today. Um, Harvard, which is again one of the most prestigious institutions around the world, it's like one of those badge of honors when someone gets to speak about and being an alumni of Harvard. Did Is that something that you were aware of when going into Harvard? Like, did you know it was one of those schools, and what kind of inspired you to even apply to be a student there?
Great question. Harvard, talk about branding,
Yeah.
has incredible history, incredible brand perception, and it has, in many ways, it's shorthand for when you hear that someone went to a school like that. There are some assumptions that you make, some of them good, some of them bad,
Mm.
but it does help open some doors, particularly in the worlds that I've been working in terms of fashion, in terms of e-commerce, in terms of marketing and branding. I grew up in Las Vegas and really wanted to experience a different part of the United States for college, and thought, that shoot for the moon, and was able to get accepted into Harvard, and it was one of the best experiences of my life. I really enjoyed it.
Wow. I've heard, you might correct me if I'm wrong, that in order for you to be able to get into an institution like Harvard, that you must have been a stellar student in high school, etc. So were you that student? Were you one of those excelling students, an A student? Were you good at something? Were you kind of share with us how before getting into that particular point your
Mm.
trajectory was?
I definitely was incredibly, it takes a village.
Okay.
So um, we had such a supportive network, both through our high school with the teachers, the guidance counselors, the principal. We had an incredible group of friends and their parents and families that none of whom had gone to necessarily Ivy Leagues, but all said, this is the path of what you should probably do if that's your goal. So we had breakout sessions to study for the SATs. We had an incredible AP program at my high school, advanced placements. And we had teachers that would come in on the weekends and do special sessions with us that were completely elective. But, if you want to improve your math skills, you want to improve your essay skills. And so they really invested a lot of time in us as students. And if you were receptive to it, it was incredible. Yeah, I think that I definitely was very fortunate. I think you have to have the grades and the test scores to be a viable candidate, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that meet that benchmark that don't get accepted. So I think part of it is also a little bit of luck. And there might have just been something in my background or my essays that caught their attention. I'm not really, sometimes I don't really know how it happened.
But you're mentioning, the role that the support structure around you was able to play. But I also would think that you also had a belief in yourself to even consider applying, meant that you saw something in yourself as well and believed in yourself to that extent that I deserve a placement in an Ivy League institution as well. So what mindset did you have? What self-belief kind of practices did you have that enabled you to even take that step to apply?
My parents, when I was growing up, gave me a really good framework, which was when we're looking at your report card or your academic achievements, if you're in elementary, junior high, or high school, obviously we want you to have good grades, but as long as we know that you tried your best, and if that means you got an A, amazing. If that means you got a B, but you just really put your heart and soul into it, or you got a C, whatever it was, that's what we care about, is your commitment to yourself, your commitment to what you're doing. And that really allowed me to say, you know what? I am going to try my hardest to get into the best school that I can. And hey, all I can do is put my best foot forward. A lot of this is out of my control. So let's just see what those building blocks are that I should try to amass and go from there.
I mean, it takes, I believe, a whole lot of self-belief. And you sharing that with eloquently with us today. What conversation did you have with yourself when selecting what you want to do and study at Harvard? What questions did you ask yourself, or debates
Mhm.
that you had with yourself for a course that would be best for you or more suitable for you? Would you say?
I entered Harvard as a physics. So Harvard, at least at the time, didn't have traditional pre-law, pre-med programs.
Okay.
And I was interested in being a doctor. So the path to doing that was to major in one of the sciences. And so I
Mm.
entered as a physics major with the goal of getting the pre-med credits and eventually becoming a doctor. And when I got to Harvard, I realized that I was no longer necessarily the top of the class. And I looked around at my peers in some of the science classes. And I thought, really interesting, but I'm not sure that this is necessarily, my crew. And so I started to say, well, if I'm not going to do necessarily pre-med, if I'm going to do something that's more liberal arts, what's something that I can only do at Harvard? And there's only 5 universities in the country at the time that had a folklore and mythology program. So I thought I can do English anywhere, I can do history anywhere, I can do economics anywhere, but where am I going to be able to do something really unique? And then I took a couple classes. A few of my really close friends were also interested in it. So we decided, hey, let's do this together. It seems incredible. And the instruction that we got, what's really fascinating is if you think about archaeology, you
Mm.
study the remnants of a society to understand the culture. So that can be pottery, that can be coins, that can be art, it's the physical remains. Folklore mythology is almost the same idea, but you take the non-written, the non-physical elements. So that's dance, that's song, that's the tales we tell. It's ceremonies like, the movements of the Japanese tea ceremony. And that's how you understand the culture and their values. So in many ways, what I do as a marketer is all about being the voice of the customer inside the company. And so much of what I was taught to do in undergrad was to be an ethnographer, to go into the field, to talk to people, to understand their behavior and their belief systems.
And I'm interested now to kind of understanding the nuances of a course of that nature. I'm sure someone might be hearing it for the first time of its existence in of its essence, right? But when I think about folk, even the word folk, which spelled FOLK, I can't separate that from a story. I can't separate because I'm from South Africa, and in Africa we have folk tales that our grandparents tell us about just stories, either fiction or non-fiction, of just imaginations that come about. But in essence, stories, right? So in its nuances, was that particular program and course embedded in storytelling? How do you imagine it or think about it now in hindsight when you are thinking about it?
It was, and you're absolutely right, that was a big part of it. It was more just taking it like a level up. It was embedded in narrative structure.
Nice.
And the stories that we tell, but not necessarily always storytelling in the way that we're used to. Something that stuck with me is a statement that the only difference between religion and mythology, between Catholicism and the pantheon of Greek gods, the only difference is belief, right? So for the people in ancient Greece, the pantheon of Greek gods was their religion, and they held this deep-seated belief in it. Today, we have a whole different diaspora of religions that people hold very near and dear. The only difference, though, is if you believe in it or not. If you don't, then you can respect it, but it's more about the storytelling. It's more about what are the values that it's transmitting to those who do believe in it. And I think that was a really powerful lesson and gave me a lot of respect for other cultures and other, ways of thinking.
And when you think about, even from you use the word narrative, right? And it's something that I think a lot of us are we understand storytelling as an art form, but the curation of narrative is something that I, as a even as not even as content creators only, but as a society in general, as people who exist in different cultures, understanding narrative and understanding the psychology that comes with narrative. From an academic point of view, do you think those kind of come into play, adding human psychology, adding societal norms into kind of the fabric of narrative and narrative construction?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you think about the best ads, right? Like Nike's Just Do It, or, Think Different by Apple, this is taking all those elements, right? It's taking like the product, it's taking what's happening in society at the moment, it's taking ideas about personal motivation, about psychological impetus, and blending it into a story and an affinity that the end customer, when they purchase, when they experience, when they wear, when they share this product, this brand, feel like they're part of a broader community, and that all dovetails together.
Now, a question that I think I have, you kind of spoke about brands that are able to effectively curate narratives that can enable a customer to buy, right? And I wonder the type of narrative, the type of stories that brands, businesses, and establishments are meant to tell. Is it those that reflect the customer, or those that reflect the brand in of itself? And where does then the collide come in that sense? What would you say about that?
The just to do a old school Venn diagram, the brand's values and the customer's values, they have to intersect. And the greater the intersection, the more that they overlap. One, the more that the customer is going to feel that they're really in sync with the brand, and also probably the opportunity for the brand to attract more customers, or for these customers to say, hey, this might be more of a niche product or experience, but I'm going to find other people that I know in my network and bring them into the fold. So that's where it becomes really exciting.
And that's where they come into a congruent state. So then what would you say Harvard, apart from the academic aspect, right? Because that is, again, it's a prestigious institution. So one can only imagine the wealth of knowledge that one gets to receive. But what about the other side of just being a Harvard alum, like being at Harvard? What did you learn about yourself and about others and about the world while you were at Harvard that you say only when you're there would you be able to understand this thing or these things that I've kind of learned from them?
What I really found incredible about Harvard was the breadth of the type of students that they admitted for undergrad, which is
Mm.
where I was. I'll give you an example. I was at a party at the Harvard Lampoon, which is the comedy publication which is famous for making a lot of Hollywood people like Conan O'Brien and others have come through, being
Mm.
at the Lampoon. So I was at a party at the Lampoon, and on one side of me was Al Gore's daughter, vice president, right, of the United States. His daughter was dancing on next to me, and then the other side was a good friend of mine who had written her Harvard application from her mother's car because at the time they were homeless, right? And we're standing all next to each other, all having a great time, and you just realize that, of course, there's a lot of incredibly privileged people who have incredible backgrounds and went to fancy private schools, but there's also a lot of people that Harvard brought in that don't necessarily fit that stereotype. And it was that diversity of opinions and backgrounds and experiences that made for really dynamic discussions at the dining room table or at events like those. So I think that it really showed that no matter where you come from, you have a seat at the table, you have great ideas. It's your opportunity to voice them and to find your confidence to say them. And I think that was a really incredible learning experience.
I can only imagine, like just being able to experience the world in its variety in a space like that, where excellence thrives, and then excellence is then being established from the differences of just backgrounds, and we can see how to craft that. And how different was Vegas from the environment that you then kind of stepped into in Harvard? Like, was it a very different world for you?
Absolutely. Just to go from the desert to a
Yeah.
coastal town on a very historic coastal town. As my parents like to joke, in Las Vegas, it's such a newer city. Most things aren't more than you're lucky if you find a building that's more than 100 years old. Whereas you go on a tour in Boston and they say this was built in 36, but you don't know, is it 1936, 1836, 1736,
70.
or even 1636? So the history was incredible, and
Wow.
Boston was such a wonderful place to be a student because there's so many other colleges. So there really was this dynamic where you would, go to Newberry Street or go to a museum, or there were, kind of cross college, groups that you could become part of, and that was a lot of fun.
Oh man. And now that you mentioned the landscape of Vegas, we have audiences from different parts of the world to get to watch the show, and they're probably wondering when they get to hear about Vegas, they think the Vegas
Mm.
casino life, but now you're talking about a desert. So explain to us
Yes.
how how that looks like for an audience member sitting somewhere else around the world who might not know a little bit more about Vegas.
Great question. Most people, when you think about Las Vegas, you think about the strip, right? You think about all the
Mm-hmm.
hotels and the casinos. Vegas is a valley surrounded by mountains, and the strip bisects the valley. So, the best analogy I can make as a New Yorker is the strip is to people that live in Las Vegas what Times Square is to people that live in New York. You don't really go if you're a local unless there's a reason, unless you're seeing a
Yeah.
show or there. Otherwise, you kind of avoid it because it's just so overwhelming and so crowded. So the local life in Las Vegas, and Las Vegas is an amazing city, great quality of life. It's a little bit more like Phoenix or Los Angeles. It's a car culture. Everyone has a car. It's a lot of master planned communities because it's all new development. So, we have like a housing development, a school, a library, and like a shopping center, and it's all been planned in advance. So it feels, in some ways, it can feel a little um, overly designed, but I just think it's so beautiful in terms of the landscape and the quality of the sun, and it is the desert, so you get extreme heat, but it's a really beautiful nature.
I haven't been to Vegas yet, but I know it's one of the trips that I also want to make and go and see and experience for myself. Um, Question that I have now, and I'm just wondering that when you then transitioned from Harvard and made that move to New York City, you mentioned that you kind of stepped into the world of fashion. Was that because you loved the world of fashion, or what inspired and ignited in the world of fashion, or it was kind of like an opportunity came in that space and you went ahead and grabbed it?
I always loved fashion and was intrigued by, listen, at the end of the day, this is a t-shirt, this is a jacket, this is a watch, but
Yeah.
they all have, you can find these items at varying price points, from fast fashion price points to high-end luxury designer price points. And yes, the quality is different. Yes, the craftsmanship is different, but it's still a t-shirt, right? So what's going to encourage me to spend $10 on this, or I'm sure there's ones out there that are $500, right? And it really comes down to brand, right? And even if it is handmade in Italy with the rarest of fibers, you have to tell that story in a compelling way to the customer for them to understand. At the end of the day, what things cost when people say it's too expensive isn't really the objection. It's that they don't understand the value,
Mm.
which means that the brand hasn't communicated effectively why they're charging that price. So I thought, let's get into the fashion world where it's so much brand, it's so fast paced. And then you have, of course, fashion shows and editorials and magazines and online and all this. And I thought this is going to be a really fun place to at least start my journey in New York. And I loved it.
Wow. I mean, yeah. Now that I'm kind of imagining and seeing it and envisioning it, you're talking about the importance of value, and it's such an even the term in and of itself is undervalued because we don't know what
Hmm.
it means, right? So what factors come into play when considering a value of something or of a product, that one is to consider and think about in order to make that value make sense to even themselves and to those that they are communicating the value to.
Absolutely. It's about finding that resonance, like we were talking about earlier, that Venn diagram
Yeah.
of what the brand represents and what the person is looking to identify with. So for some, having, let's take like a very exclusive brand like a Chanel or an Hermes, where there's been some scandals on social media about how much those products actually cost to make, but they charge really high prices. So when you wear a Chanel quilted bag outside, you're one, creating a sense of community with others who might be wearing something similar. You're cementing your place as, maybe I have the disposable income or the lifestyle or the aspiration to be part of that cohort. And then you're also saying, I believe in some way in what this brand stands for. So, I believe in the heritage. I loved Karl Lagerfeld. This is from when he was designing. I love the story of, how Chanel was one of the first female couturiers who really like made it big. Whatever it is, finding that resonance. And it doesn't all have to be necessarily around status, right? I think we're seeing an interesting play even in the luxury sector of, you know, quiet luxury. So you can have a Brunello Cucinelli or Laura Piana garment that maybe someone else who's very familiar with the brand would be able to recognize. But if you're just walking down the street, most people wouldn't know that you paid a lot of money for it. But it's not really about letting them know. It's about that it is the finest materials. You are supporting local craftsmen and craftswomen in Italy that you believe in that supply chain and all of that. So it's again, and those are two different people, right? Time. So finding out where they gravitate is what's going to resonate with the brand.
And what does psychology then have to play within being able to not necessarily twist the mind of the audience, or is the audience that is meant to receive this product or item they've already they're already part of it anyway. So I won't have to necessarily do anything psychologically to help advance their perception about what it is. Or what would you say kind of the play then is in that? Because I'm assuming that when you are in dialogue with the companies and these fashion brands, in order to be able to help them with the price point and setting place their value, that conversation was part of it. So how do you framework that, the psychology element to it?
Yeah. My my dad growing up, he was in sales
Okay.
on this real estate side of things. And he told me something that always stuck with me, which is there was a period of time when sales was very salesy, right? It felt a little overly aggressive. It felt that you were kind of being a little sly. Sales has shifted to being about education. So let's educate you about what it is that I'm offering you. And if it's right for you, great. If it's not, then that's fine too. So if you look at what's happening, I've seen a lot of development on the fashion side of things with customer education, particularly around like sustainability initiatives, recycled fibers, things like this. And there's a lot that's going on. You don't have a lot of real estate, right? Especially if you're selling into a wholesale partner. But if you look at like hang tags, what's happening when you scan the QR code, the content that's populating around that, I think brands are really saying, listen, it is more expensive to get these particular types of fabrics or to do this certain type of manufacturing. So yeah, you probably can find the same look for less, but we want you to understand that we're investing in this infrastructure. So that's why you need to invest with us with this higher price point.
And educating them on those values then, which helps them make the conscious decision to make that sale and make that buy. What did you learn about yourself when you were in the fashion space, like when you were in those conversations again with those brands and the value that you were able to offer, right? What did you discover about yourself then as Louis? Like, what something that you're like, you know what, this is my value, this is what I am.
Yeah, the fashion industry is, I think, the Devil Wears Prada paints a certain picture of it,
Sex in the
and
City and all
yeah,
these other.
um, it's fun. It's it has its moments when it's glamorous, but at the end
Yeah.
of the day, it is manufacturing, and you are working across so many teams. There's the production team actually making sure that the product is made in the factories. You have the sourcing team that's finding the raw materials. You have the technical team that's making sure things actually fit correctly. You have the design team, you have the brand team, the PR team, the sales team. It goes on and on. And when you have, like, we would have these meetings at Calvin Klein where there would be, I think the max I counted was like 35 people, and not like three senior leaders, the rest were junior. Like, probably like half the people in that room, like, were real heavy hitters in their department. And everybody had to find a way to reach a consensus on the assortment, the price point, the colorways, the distribution strategy, where we wanted to be opening up new stores, whatever the discussion was. And what I found was I have a great ability to work across teams to keep people in the loop and to hear what the concerns are from the different departments and try to synthesize those and find solutions that, listen, no one's going to be ever 100% happy, but that's the definition of good compromise. If both sides feel a little bit like they didn't 100% get what they want. So really making sure that you can hear the different concerns of the
Yes.
teams across the different areas that are managing the business and synthesizing those and working towards a common resolution that everyone can agree to.
Mhm. And now I kind of want to fast forward it to, there's been this debate because now the term and the title that you have is chief marketing officer, right? And I guess this doesn't necessarily even entail in the fashion industry only, but across the board in marketing as in general. But this debate about what is marketing, like, can we explain what it is? Is there like a finite definition of what marketing entails or what the definition of marketing is?
Marketing, more often than not, is directly correlated to driving revenue. So, initiatives that either directly or indirectly are ultimately going to increase share of market, share of voice, and customer perception.
Mm.
At some companies break out more traditional performance marketing versus brand marketing. I think that it might have been Gary Vaynerchuk who came up with the term brand formance, which is even if you're doing brand marketing, it's effectively going to be related to driving revenue and performance at the end of the day. So I think that's the shorthand for it. Um, as we were, I think at the beginning of the call, we were talking about the need to really have someone internal to a company who champions the customer and who's
Yeah.
always thinking through their lens is another core functionality of the marketing department as well.
So you'd say if there aren't enough sales, then the marketing is not strong enough because with strong marketing will come a greater revenue of sales.
That
I think
tends
that's
to
the best way to understand it, right?
Yeah, that tends to be the shorthand. Obviously, there's external factors, inflation, economy, things like this that no person can control. And I think that no amount of good marketing or media spend is going to ultimately help a brand that is selling products that customers don't fundamentally love. So that's the most important qualification that I look for when I work with a company is, my job is only going to have impact if at the end of the day someone interacts with us, they have a good experience with the shopping experience, with our customer service team, if they need to engage with them. And then when they receive it, they want to tell their friends and family, look how cool this is. You're never going to believe this because that's hands down the best type of marketing.
Yeah. The brand that you're with now, I mean, has been taking over the world of e-commerce, not only in New York, but I think just in general around the country. People who engage with the product and I use the word product specifically, even though it is a service, right, to some degree. But in and of itself is something that people then receive. And so how has it been now? I mean, it's a big transition from fashion. So how has that transition been? Or are you still taking the same principles and the same values and applying them to where you are right now?
Absolutely. So Bokksu is a really incredible company. Our hero product is a monthly subscription box that brings Japan to your doorstep. And we work with local makers. We focus primarily on snacks and treats. So savory, potato chips and unique flavors, mochi, teas, you name it. We're sourcing from small vendors in Japan and putting them into fabulous curations. And every month we send them to your doorstep. The company, though, also is unique in that we have a portfolio strategy. So there's 6 unique brands that we manage, all with their own and customer price points, email flows, ad campaigns. So in many ways, we're functioning almost like a small marketing agency within this larger organization. And then each different brand is one of our clients.
Ah, I see. And I know I don't have much time, and now I have all these questions that I want to ask you. I'm thinking we might do a part two of this conversation.
Happy to.
But so a subscription model enables you to be able to get convenience to your doorstep, but also comfort. Because when we think about the favorite snacks that we love, we think about the word comfort because they bring us that comfort in and of itself. And the role that you get to play is then enabling, as you said when you spoke about marketing as chief marketing officer, is to then drive the sales element of it. How long have you been in this role, and what would you say is the kind of the key thing that you, as Louis, as a voice, as a marketer, as someone in the industry, wants to make sure that you solidify in this company, in the world of marketing, in the world of storytelling, that you'd say that you are firstly ensuring that the customer gets to experience by you being in the company, but also the world gets to experience by you being in this industry. That's a mouthful of a question, but I would love for you to kind of wrap it up and end it with that.
I began with the company in a few months ago, so maybe about 6 months ago, and it's been around for almost 10 years. So there's an incredible amount of history and learnings and process and structure already there, which is not always the case, especially if you're going into maybe an earlier stage company. We have such a dynamic CEO. He is just the person you want to sit next to at lunch in the office. He's got such a vibrant and gregarious personality. And I think that really is infectious. And what's really fabulous about Bokksu is we have a headquarters in New York and also separate headquarters in Tokyo. Over 60% of the team identifies as someone, um, um, a person who is of color or a person who is queer in some way. So three of the four of us on in the C-suite are queer, and I think that by being in such a dynamic and diverse workforce, it really allows people to know that they're only ever going to be judged on their ideas and their productivity. And we have so much fun, and just the cultural references that we're able to share and exchange and learn about each other as a result of being able to feel so personally comfortable is something that I think I really appreciate about Bokksu.
Oh, lovely. I am definitely, now that we've had this conversation, I'm like, I want to go download Bokksu because you spoke about it so wonderfully, and the brand values behind it, and now becoming apparent to be strong and dynamic. So definitely, to anyone who's watching, let's go and get ourselves the app. Let's go and get that subscription going and get our favorite snacks on our doorstep. Louis, I am hoping we're gonna get a part two because there's so many questions I still have for you. But I have to let you go. I know you are very busy and have a very big responsibility on your shoulders. So I'll say goodbye to you and thank all our audiences at home for tuning into this conversation. I hope that you learned a thing or two, and that you are going to go ahead and apply these skills that Louis eloquently shared with us about the world of marketing, storytelling, and so much more. So thank you once again for tuning into this episode of the Vuyo Show. I am your favorite global darling, Vuyo Jaboda, with the one and only Louis, and we're promising you a part two, so stay tuned for that. Have a good one, and cheers for now.
Bye.